Hi there. Thank you so much for joining today. I know people are going to be trickling in since we just went live. So thank you for joining this conversation today. My name is Joanna Reynolds, and I'm the manager of programs and partnerships for Made in NYC. Made in NYC is a nonprofit local branding initiative that supports thousands of New York City's manufacturers and makers with marketing and branding support and building a sense of community. This event tonight is a part of our annual Made in NYC Week, which is our annual celebration of New York City's manufacturing and maker community. And Made in NYC Week 2020 is an all virtual experience of online panels, webinars, demos, tastings, virtual factory tours, and a whole series of virtual events where we're touching on the important issues in New York City's manufacturing community today. And so tonight's panel, I'm really excited to bring this to you all. Who made your clothes an equitable and innovative fashion workforce? We're going to talk about sort of where New York City's fashion workforce is now, how COVID impacted the workforce, and then where do we go from there? Where are we going in the future? And I'll bring on and introduce our speakers who are going to tell you a little bit more about themselves. We have Benita Singh who is Nest's Chief Programs Officer. We have Ngozi Okaro, the Executive Director of Custom Collaborative, and Abada Wadood, the founder and head of impact for Lula and part-time faculty at Parsons School of Design. I will start with you, Benita, if you could each just briefly introduce yourself to the audience and tell us who you are, about your organization, and what you do.
Sure, great. Thanks, Joanna. Thanks for including Nest in this discussion today. As Joanna mentioned, I'm the Chief Programs Officer at Nest. Nest is a New York City-based nonprofit that works with artisan cooperatives, maker businesses around the world in over 100 countries through the Nest Guild. We also, in the past 18 months, have launched our domestic programming, which is Makers United, which is focused on building a more diverse and equitable makers movement in cities across the country. We really have three pillars to our mission. The first is to improve women's well-being, preserve important cultural traditions, and improve worker well-being beyond the four-walled factory, which is really manifested through the Nest Seal for Ethical Handcraft, which can be seen at a number of our partner retailers. We most recently launched sort of a really exciting manifestation of Makers United as part of our partnership with the Garment District Alliance, and are in the final stages of sort of synthesizing the data and the conversations that we've had with over 100 business owners in New York's Garment District, which will be published into a formal landscape mapping in the next 4 to 6 weeks as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I forgot to mention at the top that Made in NYC, Nest, and Custom Collaborative are part of this business collaborative working with the Garment District Alliance to both do the sort of data collection and the work that Benita was just talking about. And Made in NYC is built programming specifically for fashion manufacturers that we're going to be offering this fall and also next year in 2021. Next up, Ngozi, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Joanna. Thanks so much. Excited to be here. Made in NYC Week. I love NYC, so perfect place. I lead Custom Collaborative, which is a nonprofit social enterprise that supports women from low income and immigrant communities develop careers in sustainable fashion. So like Nest and Made in NYC, we're in the same Garment District Alliance partnership to both gather data from Garment District businesses and also create programming really to advance garment making in New York. And that really will be informed by the survey that we're collaboratively working on and collecting data for. Super excited to be here. We have, at Custom Collaborative, we have work in 2 different locations. So one of our offices is in East Harlem, one in West Harlem. And I guess now we're actually all in the same place, which is in the cloud. But I'm really excited to talk and learn about more initiatives and hear what our partners are doing. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And next up, Abada, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone as well?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me, Joanna. It's really nice to see Ngozi from Custom Collaborative and Benita from Nest. So I am the founder and head of impact at Lula. We design better handbags made in Brooklyn to employ formerly incarcerated women. And what that really looks like is building a pipeline that is sustainable and contributes to a sustainable workforce. So we piloted in 2019 our training program, and we had 5 women graduate from our program who were trained in handbag design and construction, which included everything from industrial sewing and leather work to handbag design and sustainability training. And we really focus on a regenerative model that emphasizes and centers justice and equity. So primarily we are working around the issue of workforce development for women who have already been marginalized by our systems, and that includes our industries. And so we're really looking forward to relaunching that program. Obviously, COVID has impacted all of the work that we're doing, but really looking forward to that, and also launching our product. And then, as you mentioned, I also teach in the School of Design Strategies at Parsons, which is part of the new school. And I'm also teaching for the Open EDU initiative at the Slow Factory right now. So thanks so much for having me.
Great. Thanks so much. It's so great to have you all here. We've all worked together in different ways before, so really glad to be having this conversation. Sorry about the motorcycle that you probably just heard running down my street. We're going to have a conversation in 3 parts. We're going to talk a little bit first about where we are now. We're going to then talk about how COVID impacted where we were and is still impacting where we are now, and then talk a bit about looking forward to the future. So I know Benita and Ngozi, you've been doing research and outreach, talking to businesses in the Garment District, and what have you been finding, and where are we now in terms of local manufacturing in New York City and fashion, and the workforce and the needs and the gaps there?
Sure. So I think that if we were to sort of based on the conversations we've been having in the Garment District over the past weeks, if we were to sort of synthesize what we're finding, is we're seeing really this sort of resiliency and this survival that's happening. And obviously, even predating COVID, the future of the Garment District has kind of always been in question in terms of how many businesses are offshoring, and what's really the sort of the state of the industry in these sort of 5 blocks that we're focusing on. As part of our research, we really focused on business owners. So we had conversations with 120 business owners in the Garment District because, and our philosophy behind that was, if the folks who own the businesses can't keep the lights on, then that's obviously going to have consequences that ripple through across the supply chain. So we really wanted to hear from business owners in terms of what are their challenges to actually keep their operations intact and keep their operations in a place where they can continue to employ the workers that they're currently employing. And I think that there were really 2 key findings for us thus far that have stuck out. The first, which was extremely eye-opening and enlightening to us, is that even in spite of the fact that we were talking to business owners, so we have not yet even gone to the worker level, we weren't talking to the pleaters or the embroiderers or the people that were doing like the sequin handwork. We were talking to the business owners, and we actually had 48% of those businesses ask us for the survey to be translated into another language other than English. So we then went back and actually translated the survey into Mandarin, Korean, and Spanish. And with those translations, we were actually able to get, 100% completion. And that unearthed a range of other challenges that the business owners are facing right now, which is that when English is not your first language, things like getting a PPP loan become much more challenging than they are for a business owner for whom English is their first language. Things like applying for PPE, the opportunity to produce PPE through a bidding system becomes that much more complicated. And then when we kind of looked at our findings in parallel with what we were reading in the press, and if you go to, if you Google garment district COVID, you'll actually see articles about, there's an opportunity for a garment district revival. And those are really talking about what we determined based on our research to be a really sort of select lucky few that were able to sort of transcend through the sort of the potential for rebirth that's happening in the garment district. So I think moving forward, and I know we'll talk about this more, we're really think that there's an opportunity to focus on how can we reach the business owners that aren't able to yet leverage those opportunities that have become available through the range of COVID relief, PPP, PPE.
Thank you. That was a really great overview of the work and the research that you've been doing. And one thing, I know you mentioned that you've been talking to the business owners. What have you heard around, like, who is, even though you haven't spoken directly to the workers, like, who is making our clothes right now? And like, are there gaps? Are there needs that is there a mismatch in needs between the factories and the folks that are there? And Ngozi, feel free to jump in as well if you'd like.
Yeah, just about 50% of the business owners that we spoke to shared that the difficulties that they were facing was finding the workforce they need to meet the opportunities that they see in front of them. And of those close to 50%, it was 49% shared that they are having difficulties finding the workforce they need. So of those 49%, the top reason was a lack of skilled workers. So these are, business owners that are looking for skills that may not exist in the garment district anymore, may not exist in the same quantity that they existed maybe 20, 30 years ago. And I feel like for those of us who have been working in the sector for a number of years, we kind of hear these sort of legends, like there's one person in the garment district who's a master pleater, and that's the one person that you can go to if you need like expert pleats done. So that was really backed up by the data we were seeing, is that the skills that they are looking to have so that they can effectively meet the potential for orders coming their way is not there. So that's when you have businesses going to Italy or going to India to kind of find that skilled labor. But it was also very interesting because the second biggest challenge that they shared in terms of, how the reason why they're not able to kind of match the skills they need with the skills they're finding is that they were actually looking for digital marketing strategies. How can they get their factories, how can they get their workshops discovered on the internet? So it was this very interesting sort of dichotomy of the fact that they're looking for sort of these old school skills, but they also need the new world skills of making their factories relevant in a digital age at the same time.
Yeah, so as I mentioned at Custom Collaborative, we're working in tandem. So we've seen a little bit of the data, and I can't wait to plow through it. But one of the things that we had thought would be the case, based again on anecdotal evidence, was that many of the categories in which people were trained for certain jobs, like those people didn't exist anymore. Those people were retiring. There's only one or two people. So That is useful, very useful for us, because at Custom Collaborative, we do train people. We, have a pool of women who are ready to work. And so it will be great to know, in addition to the skills that we currently teach, what are the skills that the employers need, right? So then there's no longer this mismatch. And it will be great to sift through the data, because another thing that we do, and I saw that it was part of the program earlier, is develop worker-owned cooperatives, right? So some people might decide, well, it's not, I don't want to remain in this business anymore, whether it's retirement or moving or whatever. And so we can facilitate a group of employees buying out the business. So I really look forward to seeing the other data and just thinking expansively about the possibilities. So garment manufacturing can really remain in New York and thrive and grow, hopefully.
Yeah, we actually did a webinar just earlier today for Made in NYC Week around worker owner cooperatives and those conversions. So everyone check it out, about sort of how to move through that process. Yeah, that's really great, and that's something I want to get into a little bit later around. I know Abada and you've worked a lot in training women to fill some of this gap, and so when we talk about like the future, how do we get there, and how do I want to talk definitely more about that. Moving on just to our section about COVID-19. I think we know that COVID, and you were talked about this a little bit, that COVID-19 has severely impacted every industry, and particularly the garment industry. And I know that, one way, it impacted in a number of different ways. One of the things that happened is that in the midst of crisis, many companies pivoted their production to make masks or other necessary items. Ngozi, I know that Custom Collaborative has masks. And just how have you seen that impact even your, Custom Collaborative and your business and the women that you work with? And how did the role of homemaking sort of collide with that effort during the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just thinking about the early days of our mask making, we were desperate to find a cutter. And like every cutting room that we called, they were closed. One wanted to be open, but his employees were scared to come to work. So thankfully, we found a factory that would cut, thanks to you, actually, Joanna. So it worked out well for us. At Custom Collaborative, the central purpose of our existence is to provide earned income opportunities for women. And when COVID hit, the earned income opportunities ran out for them, whether they worked in a restaurant, in addition to working at a hat shop, in addition to working for us, as we gave work to them from other designers. So we decided that the next best thing to do would be to make masks. So we made more than 6,000 masks. And it was really a challenge figuring out how to make masks remotely, to get people materials and to lead instruction. And we were fortunate to have a volunteer who jumped in to help drive materials around, and even sewing machines to some people, when the FedEx and others became unreliable. So we did that for not only because the women needed income, but also because there was a community need for masks. And fortunately, we got a grant in partnership with from Nest, to make PPE to donate. And so we did that. We donated to nursing homes, to children's protests, to all types of facilities, even shelters. And so it was a great opportunity. On this side, I can say it was a great opportunity to learn how to really manage mass manufacturing remotely. Hopefully we will never have to do that again, but we learned a lot, and we learned more of who are the people who we can turn to in New York when faced with a crunch.
Yeah, and you mentioned a little bit that was great and great work that you're doing. I have 2 of your masks. I own them and I wear them and I get lots of compliments on the colors and everything. So, you mentioned that when you were looking for a cutter, there were a lot of places that were closed because people were afraid to go to work. And like, are there some specific challenges that workers in the fashion district have due to COVID-19, and as people are now returning and there are factories that have been open, and is there anything that you've seen, and then we'll kind of like go from there and go into a little bit about homemaking and the importance of that.
Yeah, so most of all of our making, besides the cutting that Spoiled Rotten factory did for us, all of our mask making was homemaking. I don't know, Benita, have you heard anything kind of during your interviews?
Yeah, it's so interesting actually because as Ngozi mentioned, through the PPE purchasing initiative for Nest, we actually financed home workers around the country that had transitioned to mask making in a home working setting. So we kind of, going into the survey, anticipated that we would see similar trends in the garment district in terms of transition to PPE production. And it was actually the case that 66% of the businesses that we spoke to did not transition to PPE production, 27% were able to partially transition, and 7% fully transitioned. And when we dug a little bit deeper there in terms of our conversations and interviews, we heard again that the process of submitting an application to respond to the government bid for PPE and masks was a very complicated process. And when you look at the garment district, and it kind of begins to make sense because these are businesses that are used to obviously producing wholesale. They're not used to, taking the next step to actually then market the masks that they're producing or putting them on an e-commerce website. They're really, producing for a buyer that then does that job of actually getting it to the consumer. So it kind of makes sense that even if you're looking at a workshop or a factory in the garment district, if they don't have that skill set to actually get it on a direct to consumer platform, that they won't necessarily transition to mass production. And when we looking at the businesses that we funded, both in New York as well as around the country, we saw that was the trend, that the organizations that we were funding were often producing masks from home, because while they may not have had the infrastructure that you see in a business in the garment district, they had the direct to consumer capability and the marketing know-how and the Instagram know-how to promote the fact that they were making masks as well.
I have one more question for Ngozi around, and we've talked to a couple of our businesses, and I know that Custom Collaborative is unique in that you produce, but you're also nonprofit, and so there you have a shop where you can purchase things, and so and a couple of our businesses said that the mask making was a way for them to sustain a new business that they're probably going to continue far into the future. And has that become like a viable option for resiliency and for adding a new piece to your company, or is it more of a temporary production model piece that you're going to continue?
That's a great question. It is definitely a temporary measure. Unlike the businesses who Benita spoke with, we thought, okay, so we need to make masks and sell masks, and so we'll make and sell those masks. We didn't really think about our marketing strategy or our sales strategy. We just felt that there was this need for masks. So we still have many masks to sell, customcollaborative.org/shop. And but we're excited to have done it because in general, in the past, we would make like 3 or 4 of one item, based on the amount of fabric that we got donated. For the mask, we got, hundreds of yards of fabric from Mara Hoffman donated, from Carl Goldberg custom shirts. And so we made like really beautiful masks, but it was really about getting materials out and getting invoices in from the makers and not as much about selling them. So we were fortunate to have like some bulk sales. Of course, we were able to give some away. I'd say Marsh McLennan and some others bought large amounts from us. Even Spanx did. So it is working itself out, but we have inventory. And so I don't see us doing this necessarily in the future, although we have made masks for some independent companies. So people have hired us to make masks for them. And so we've done that. I mean, we're experts at it now, but I don't know that we necessarily want to do this going forward. And hopefully we won't have to wear them forever. Yeah.
I hope that too. I hope it's not a forever thing. It feels a little bit like it right now.
It's almost up to us. Like, are we going to wear them for the next few months, or do we decide we need to wear them for the next 4 years? But I digress.
No, exactly. Benita, kind of going more into the home. I know that Nest has done a lot of work with homemaking and artisans, and wondering how this temporary fix in order to produce for some folks is something that was already happening and is a way, should be part of the future of production, and what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking on a global level, home working is something that obviously Nest has long been an advocate for, not only in terms of nurturing women's equality, providing greater employment opportunities around the world. And now it's really something that is directly tied, we believe, to supply chain resiliency. And if you are, a buyer in the US or a brand, and you have a supply chain in which all of the workers work in factories in cramped conditions where social distancing may not be possible, we truly do believe that puts that supply chain at a disadvantage as compared to a supply chain in which home working is accepted, acknowledged, recognized, and precautions are put into place to make sure that the workers in those home working settings are receiving the same rights as workers should receive in a four-walled factory, which is what directly informs the Nest standards and the Nest seal for ethical handcraft. And we certainly believe that our work is taking on new meaning in this time during which we're all home workers, and supply chains and brands that have traditionally shunned home working because of concerns around child labor, concerns around liability, really need to kind of take this opportunity, we believe, to acknowledge that homework not only exists, but homework contributes to supply chain resiliency. Similar to the great work that Custom Collaborative has been doing, we also funded a refugee organization in Seattle that was producing thousands of masks from their homes. And it's, as I mentioned, a refugee organization, and a number of the husbands of the women that were sewing masks were furloughed or laid off from their jobs as Uber drivers, and they were actually started to use their Ubers to drive materials around so that the materials could get to the women in their homes and that they could produce the masks. So yes, and I think coming back and bringing it into focus in New York, we saw that around a little over 50% of business owners in the garment district shared that they were able to facilitate remote work during the pandemic, and that 94% of those 50% of businesses were able to supply the infrastructure, sewing machines, supplies, whatever was required for workers to work effectively from their home. So we're really interested kind of in the next phase of work to dig deeper into that and really understand, is that really going to be a permanent shift? Is New York going to have its sort of own new crop of home workers that is coming out of this pandemic? Is that a temporary situation? What does that look like for the future is something that we're really interested in sort of digging behind those numbers a little bit.
Great, thank you. We're getting to sort of the the future conversation. And I definitely want to tap Abada in for some of this around, what are some equitable and actionable ways, and this is kind of a question for all of you, that fashion brands and factories can equitably build their workforce and engage in order, when they're saying there's this skills gap, what is the way that we can, what in an ideal world, and the vision around how do we move forward, and what are actionable things that we can do?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm excited to hear Ibada talk because similar to Custom Collaborative, Lula has a training program, right? And I was at that 2019 graduation, and it was so exciting to witness women learning new skills and putting them into practice. And so definitely Ibada,
Hey, Abada.
tell everybody.
Hi, thank you so much. I had to change location for a technical issue, but all is good. Yeah, absolutely. I would love to contribute to this idea of what the future of fashion will look like. I think through my lens and the work that we do at Lula, the key word for me is sustainability. And I think that means obviously equal focus on people and the planet. When we're talking about workforce development, I think that that's one of the ways that we can start to really think more innovatively and center equity and justice to make systemic change in some of the models for the work that we're doing, right? And I think that rather than thinking of it as like a traditional give back model, we can think about how to actually embed jobs into some of our ecosystems. So for example, at Lula, I like to say that our roadmap to profitability is sustainability, because our workforce, right, which is obviously is inextricably linked to the business, and we are a for-profit social enterprise. So we obviously have this training and educational component, which is our workforce development program, which also serves through a number of partnerships as our alternative to incarceration program. But then we also have this component, which is the brand element, right? And so that's the commercial aspect. And I think that as we start to sort of add more stuff to the world, and we're thinking about coping in the context of crisis, right, especially, and not even just surviving, but thriving, right? Like, how are we going to grow? How are we going to scale in the midst of crisis? Sorry about the background noise, but I'm trying to speak loud enough. I think that we have to think about actually like building more regenerative models that can support some of these amazing ideas that, folks like Ngozi have, like as the leader at Custom Collaborative, or that Bonita has, because their ability to create impact obviously is so ripe. And so I think we have to all work collectively within the industry, whether it's academics or, social entrepreneurs or nonprofit leaders, but I think across sectors and across industries to think about the systems that are needed to actually build a sustainable workforce. And so for me, that really goes back to equity and social justice, right? I can share more, but I'll let someone else kind of jump in and also give you a break from the background.
Yeah, I just think that Ibada is absolutely right when she's talking about we have to think expansively and then really collectively create what the workforce and what work will look like. So instead of just a direct hierarchical model, the people who are doing the work have some say in how the work is done and what work is done. So it's not just automation, but also we're talking about the actual people. And so one thing that I really admire about Ibada's work with Lula is that she identified like a marginalized population and said, okay, so we send people into incarceration or other elements, And when they come out, we just decide, okay, well, there's nothing that they can do. And so I think that Ibarra has identified, well, that actually, people, whether they were incarcerated or on probation, parole, whatever, that they still have value and they can still learn things and make really great bags, right? And so I think that that is almost an innovation in American society, really saying that like we can reclaim people and that there are not throwaway people and they can learn skills and they have value to add. And I feel like that is great for society and for the individual people. So I'm really excited about what the future of work is.
Yeah, I think actually, Ngozi, that's so true. We talk a lot in the realm of sustainability, I think in particular, about this industry being like a throwaway industry, right? And like moving toward one with stronger values that focus on regard, right, for human dignity and dignity for the planet. But we don't always apply that same ethos in our actions to people, right? Like we don't look in particular and say, okay, like here's an opportunity, right? And I think that, again, that's why I really like to emphasize this idea of, sustainability and, in particular, social justice being this roadmap for profitability, because I think you can look at it as a market opportunity. Obviously, people aren't, you have to do that in a humane way. But I think that it's a missed opportunity. And so I think that that's a mindset shift to the future of fashion and the future of the workforce. I think we'll really have to look at the younger generation and the values that they are saying that they care about, right? To really understand what the pathway forward is. But certainly it's a generation that cares about the well-being of people and the well-being of the planet more than any generation before them. And so I think that if we're not doing that in an authentic way, then it's not going to be sustainable, right? And so building the infrastructure, I think, little by little to do that can actually is proven to be more rewarding, right? And in terms of profitability, a better return on your investment. But also, I think we're moving into a world and into a generation where it's very easy for young people to sort of suss out this like inauthentic social activism or an authentic commitment to sustainability. So I think more and more, the more the industry can come together and collaborate to think about, how we can sort of start to apply some of these models that are regenerative. I think the better off we'll all be.
At NAST, we have a professional fellowship program, which has been pretty much in place since our founding. It's close to 15 years ago, whereby we identify skilled experts from the fashion and design industry, and they actually go to the artisan businesses that we're working with around the world and work with them on product design, ops optimization, really honing in on a skill set that we've identified that artisan business needs, and works with them through an intensive 2 to 4 week fellowship to create a deliverable for the artisan business. And something that we're really excited about for our work in the garment district right now is that it's kind of our opportunity to reverse that model that we've been using for the past 15 years. And I think that it's clear that the work that Ngozi and Ibarra are doing is so important, because it is that, that 49% of businesses who said that they can't find the skills that they're looking for. Like, what are those skills? How can we tactically provide them? And how can we sort of train the workforce that is there and ready to work, or the students that are coming out of college and ready to work? How can we train them to bridge that gap? Because it's not always the case that fashion brands are offshoring because it's cheaper, or because they're just kind of by default going to China. We heard from a number of business owners as well that they're losing a lot of business to Italy. So brands are really looking for, skilled quality work and quality craftsmanship. And if a brand can be built around that in New York, that New York is a place for that, the same way that Italy is a place for that, and that those skills can be imparted to the individuals that are working here today, that's a real opportunity and something that we're really excited to be collaborating with the whole collective on as well.
Something that, as you all were speaking, I was thinking about is the pipeline of employment and how the work of Custom Collaborative and Lula, like what is the way, who are the brands that we need to be connecting to, and how do we build that pipeline? I know that both of you have different relationships with brands in the industry, and how, like, what is the pathway forward to continuing to strengthen that pipeline and educate brands about what's available and training, and kind of move that forward? Let me know if that made sense.
Yeah, sure. Why don't I jump in? One of the things that well actually developed during COVID was like mass collaborations, right? So we've done collaborations with 3 New York companies so far in mass: Hanky Panky, made in New York, Lafayette 148, and Mara Hoffman. And it was great to work with these companies on that level because we hadn't done so before. And so it makes me think about like what the greater possibilities are. I mean, I would say that fashion manufacturing in New York is very much like an insider's thing. It's like a small circle. And we were fortunate through some of our connections to be able to penetrate that during COVID. So I just feel like there are a lot of opportunities. And so now we know a few more companies, and people know about our work. And so there's more opportunity for apprenticeships, internships, and jobs, all of which we've been doing. But I think that there's greater opportunity now. And again, the businesses, so the 49%, right, who are saying that they don't have the skilled workers, they by and large did not know about Custom Collaborative or Lula. And so then the more we have this data, we can really expand the network and meet the needs of both sides, both the employers and the potential employees, and of course the city, right? Because we want to have a vibrant city, a vibrant tax base moving forward.
Thank you. That was great. One more thought I had was around, I know the theme of this conversation is around workforce, but where does workforce start and entrepreneurship start, and how do we balance that out in order to make sure we have a vibrant local fashion economy and community?
I'm happy to kind of talk about that. So can you just clarify again, Joanna, so you're saying the difference between workforce and sort of entrepreneurship, and
how do we,
or how they are developed, or how capacity is built in those
yeah,
areas?
and how to balance the importance of both. Not everyone is going to be an entrepreneur, but if we focusing on just workforce development and training, there, how do we balance them both out in order to sustain like a larger local fashion economy and community?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's something that we've asked ourselves a lot at Lula, in terms of thinking about like our commercial brand being a D2C model, and then also having like a B2B component where we're working with brands to actually implement social impact in some way on their behalf, which is really what, again, going back to also even the previous question, how we are approaching this in terms of growth and scale is to work with other brands who maybe want to create impact, but rather than using all of that startup capital, right, to invest in some kind of programming or activity, they can actually partner with someone like us at Lula and sort of like fund some of this work, and then offer that product in their stores again with the existing infrastructure, right? So I think a lot of it is about just thinking about, especially having gone through this experience together as a society, right? Like this global pandemic. I think for a lot of us, it's been the first time where, culturally, politically, socially, we have experienced something that has such an enormous significance in our current and in times and probably in history. So I think that we are in a period of time where obviously a lot of people are anticipating change, and so it's a really good time to think about sort of how to create change in a way that will be long lasting and sustainable, and also not just going back to the old ways, not trying to reinstate the status quo, but carrying forward sort of best practices, but then maybe thinking about new ways to apply those, I think. Because of course there's a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity and talent within our industry, and I think that's what we need to carry forward. I think we need to be more rigorous when it comes to sort of scrutinizing the quality of the outputs of our industry, right? Because if it's just consumption, and waste, then what is the significance of that? But if it's real impact that we can measure and that we can see that's visible, I think that's what the future will look like. And it'll be expected. And I think already we're seeing this generation demand that. So I think it's a big opportunity for us to tap into.
On the topic of entrepreneurship, I think we saw that obviously the business owners, there's an inherent entrepreneurial spirit there because that's the segment that we were focused on. But even more so, around 29% of the business owners were born in the US, meaning that the remainder were born outside of the US, which means that their entrepreneurial spirit is even more deeply embedded in them in terms of being immigrants and coming to this country and launching a business. And I think, again, coming back to the fact that a number of these businesses have been struggling well before COVID, I think speaks to their resiliency and their entrepreneurial spirit, that they've been able to survive through the number of challenges that they've been able to survive through. And we just continue to come back to, again, that amazing finding in the sense that, just under 50% of them needed the survey in a different language. And so you can have sort of the entrepreneurial spirit and the resiliency and the sort of creativity to keep your business going. But if you can't access the resources, and if you can't fill out that PPP loan or apply to do PPE and mass production, you're always going to be at an inherent disadvantage. So we just see, in addition to sort of the skills building work that organizations like Custom Collaborative and Ibaada's organization can lead, we also see just a great opportunity to bridge that language gap, and to make sure that if these businesses with their entrepreneurial resilience get the support they need to even understand, like as they're struggling with their rents right now, like understand what are their rights with regards to like being a tenant, with the laws that Cuomo has passed with regards to like rent forgiveness, and how can they be well informed about that and know what their rights are as a business as they're talking to their landlord. That's just going to be so essential in terms of providing the entrepreneurs with the hard skills and more like knowledge that they need to get through this time as well.
Thank you. And Ngozi, I believe Custom Collaborative also has like a incubator piece of your model. And I know that right now it's just a really challenging time for existing businesses, and but we lost her. We lost Ngozi. That's okay. We'll keep going.
I bet she'll jump back in.
What's that?
I bet she'll jump back in.
She'll jump back in. She'll jump back in. But yeah, oh, there she is. Let me bring her back. You're back.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, just wanted to ask you quickly before we start to wrap up around the incubator piece of Custom Collaborative and why that was an important aspect of what you do in addition to the trainings, work that you do with the women that you work with.
Sure. Yeah. So that's a great question. And actually, the incubator is in some ways a part two of our training. So the way it works is that after women graduate from the Training Institute, they're eligible to participate in the incubator. Through the incubator, we can place them in jobs, in apprenticeships. We can help them develop their businesses, and we also provide earned income opportunity by connecting them with work from like small and emerging designers in New York, right? So somebody recently came to us about, of course, masks, but wanting to make 400 silk masks. So for that, we'll say to the women in our program, okay, we know what your skills are. How do you feel about this fabric? How do you feel about this job? And so then we will get the work from the designer and then contract with a woman to make it. It could be something like that, or it could be something like making a sample, but all of these things we can do within the context of the incubator. So again, it's something that helps people out on both sides of the equation. And I think it's also connected to your earlier question about like entrepreneurship and employees. So the way we look at it, we train people to be entrepreneurs because one, then they can have businesses, but also people who are trained to think about a business in a more holistic way are then also better employees, right? So then people understand why, as an employer, you're making certain decisions, and then can also, make similar decisions themselves and just be more invested in the company. I would also say that there's an additional connection to entrepreneurship and being an employee, really about in terms of the worker-owned cooperatives that you all talked about a little bit earlier. And so we have just launched a cooperative, Fashion That Works Production, and there are 7 women who have finished Custom Collaborative's training program, and they're working together in this cooperative so that everybody doesn't have to like cut and sew and sell and make these purchasing decisions, but people can really work together and use their skills to their best impact and scale business.
Thank you. That's a great insight into how that works and how you really are making these connections with opportunities and the graduates of your program who are part of Custom Collaborative. We just have a couple minutes left. I'm about to wrap up and close up. And any closing thoughts? I really thank you all for being a part of this conversation tonight. But just wanted to open it up for any final thoughts before we say goodbye. Okay. Well, this was a great conversation. I really want to thank Ngozi Abada and Benita, you all for joining. Everyone who's watching, please go check out their organizations and the work that they do. We'll make sure to add that in the chat. Abada, sorry, you were just unmuted. Do you want to say something?
Yep, I was going to say that we're shoplula, LULAH.com, and we'll be launching our product soon. But for now, if you follow us on social media, you'll be able to just kind of see the updates and what's coming next. You can sign up for our mailing list at shoplula.com.
Great. And then I'll also share Nest. I shared Custom Collaborative's website a little bit earlier. I'm going to drop Nest's info in there for everyone as well, so you can read up more about all of the amazing work that they're doing, and keep an eye out for Lula's products. Go buy a Custom Collaborative mask, and just continue to engage and support local manufacturers in New York City. So yeah, before we wrap, just wanted to thank you all. Thank you everyone for watching. This was a part of Made in NYC Week 2020. We have a couple more days until Friday of virtual events, virtual panels, all of these events that we're putting on virtually are all recorded and then added to our website, www.madeinnycweek.com, which is our website for the week, where you can go and rewatch things, poke around, see what happened yesterday, and kind of continue to engage with all of the content that we are bringing together. Additionally, Made in NYC Week is very generously supported by a number of sponsors who I quickly wanted to thank before we closed up. So would like to thank the New York City Council, who supports Made in NYC's work all year long, as in addition to Square, the Brooklyn Navy Yard, Uncommon Goods, Goldman Sachs, Cozen O'Connor, GMDC, Lisk NYC, TD Bank, Verizon, City Point, and Adafruit. So thank you all for your support for Made in NYC. Keep checking in on the rest of the week and have a great night. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Bye, Benita. Good night.
Thank you all so much.